Okay, I have 4:00. Here we go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Leadership Book of the Month. I'm Kelly Byrnes here with Bret and Dave, and we'll all do introductions in a minute. Welcome to our 11th book of the month. Can you believe that? Our 11th one. So it's great to be with everyone, and welcome to this one. Our purpose for these discussions is always helping you invest in yourself, invest in your leadership today so you'll be a great leader tomorrow. So I mentioned I'm Kelly Byrnes. Bret, do you want to do a quick introduction?
Sure. We've all got different backgrounds, and the tie that kind of binds us together is Rockhurst University. I was a student in the business school, and obviously Dave and Kelly are on the faculty there. So that kind of binds us, but we've all been in different roles in our careers and industry. Mine is in food manufacturing, a little over 30 years, and have held different roles from mostly in the pork and poultry space, as high as executive level VP of food service at a top 4 processor. And I'm currently now working with early stage pork and poultry companies as I grow their business.
Yay. And Dave?
All right, Dave Lingerfelt, educator, specializing in healthcare, data analytics, technology topics. Great to be with everyone, and as always, my 10 plus years as an educator, it's never been done the same way. Looking back, I always joke that maybe I should have been a history teacher so I could just stand up and talk about World War II. But not the way it played out. And I think I enjoy it this way. So it's always fun looking at how things change, and we could not be in more diverse times than we ever have been. So it's been a lot of fun, and I'm happy to be here with everybody today.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm Kelly Byrnes with Voyage Consulting Group, and we focus on leadership because it drives culture, and culture drives performance. And I actually did 2 of these book conversations last year, 2 or 3, before Bret and I started talking about, hey, come on aboard. And so it's been exciting to have both of you as part of the journey. And then Dave joined a few months after that. And so it's been fun to have all 3 of us along on the journey. And talking about how things change, Bret, now seems like a time to talk about that list.
Let's go. That's fine.
Okay.
So I'm always through the month looking for content. I'm looking for material, and I bookmark it, I flag it, I bend back corners, all those kind of things. But I'm always looking for things to share. And I talk often about my daughters, and they're young, 20-year-olds just entering their first couple of years of the professional world. So usually I'm vetting it through them, saying, hey, you know what, I want my daughters to be aware of that. And what I've gotten feedback from them is, Dad, hey, that you kind of tell us the same things differently all the time and repackage. And the things they talk about are communication, being a good listener, empathy, and self-awareness, and emotional intelligence. So as Kelly was mentioning, I don't know if you want to throw that list up there, Kelly, we'll talk about it here. But I was just looking on LinkedIn, and I found this list, and I thought, this is spot on and speaks to what we're trying to get done here. So this list is called the 10 things that take 0 talent but earn you 100% respect. And we won't go through them. You can read them for yourself. But where I went with this is my youngest daughter interned this summer at T-Mobile for Deloitte. And her first day, she came home and she said, Dad, you're never going to believe this. We were all in a room, and the lady said, you're all smart. And she looked at them. Each one of them said that. You're all smart. That's why you're here. And, a company like Deloitte gets the best and brightest from any university that they want. She said, no one here needs to prove to us that you're smart. You are smart. We know that. Now we're going to learn if you have kind of the soft skills, if you can be on time, if you can be a good team member, if you can be a good listener, if you can do good work. And that's kind of an interesting deal, because then obviously she came home and she said, Dad, she said the same things you say. All those soft skills are going to be the things that are going to differentiate, one from the other, and sort, what I call the better from the best. And all of these things here on this list, I keep reinforcing. And Kelly and I, when we were doing our pregame, we went through this list, and Kelly had kind of some interesting takes, because I know she kind of expands on the quiet quitter thing. So I'm going to turn it over to Kelly and have her layer on her thoughts.
Yeah, I just think it's a good list to look through, and it's one a lot of us take for granted. Dave, I don't know if you had a chance to look through the list, and it seems like common sense, right, along with today's book. But then you think about the quiet quitting and the way Gen Z is reprioritizing life, and what does work ethic mean to them? It doesn't mean the same thing to them, I don't think, that it did to somebody that's 50 that, learned what work ethic was from a World War II or that generation of a parent. And then what was the one? Doing extra was the one we started talking about the other day in the pregame.
Right.
Doing extra, and they don't want to do extra. A lot of people, they're not paid to do extra. They want to just do the amount that they're paid for, and be proud of that and happy with that, and not expect any more. Dave,
so we try to, we try to speak to this continuum of everybody that's listening, from people that are maybe early in their career, 30 and younger, and then there's people that are leaders and senior executives. And you say, well, what role does this play for me? If I've reached that level in my career, I'm probably doing these things, and that's true. But are you mentoring? And I think that's really where this value speaks to, hey, the people that need to see the list, plus probably the leaders that need to share this list with maybe their subordinates or direct reports or somebody that they're mentoring. And mentoring is such a valuable process. It's a valuable skill, and something that I encourage every leader to do, because obviously, there will be a time when we'll retire and pass the baton to the next generation. And obviously they'll do and perform as well as we've taught them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'll post that list I'll post a link to that in our in the comments after this video ends. So everybody, if you couldn't read it or you just want your own copy of it, I'll have that available for everybody. And I think that'd be a great conversation for a mentor to have with somebody on their way up, and the mentor can learn from it too. Right. So learn what their perspective is. So mutual mentoring can go on there.
Sure.
So some of those things were common sense that seem like common sense to some, aren't so common to others. And then that brings us to our book, The Ministry of Common Sense. So Martin Lindstrom is advocating for companies to create a sort of ministry inside their organizations to eliminate bureaucratic red tape, eliminate bad excuses, and corporate BS. And so I wasn't quite sure what to expect in getting to the book, but I had seen him speak, so that's why I recommended. I bought his book, which I don't always do, but I did buy his book after I heard him speak a couple times. I think it was early last year, and pandemic. I can't remember what year it is or where. The timing is kind of off, but it was early last year. And I really liked his stories, and he's a very relatable person. So for somebody that grew up in, where was he from?
Denmark.
Yeah, from Denmark. Yes, I should know. And he was a huge fan of Legos as a kid. He had such an interesting life, but he's well known, just the, I don't know, among the top branding and marketing, and the stories that he'll tell, you can see are why he is that. And he can really get into the head of the customer of a variety of different industries. And so I was really, really intrigued by all of those stories. Time magazine named him one of the world's most 100 influential people 3 years in a row. And for 3 years in a row, Thinkers 50 selected him as one of the top 50 business thinkers. Let's see. He's worked with Burger King, Lowe's, Boar's Head, Beverly Hills Hotel, Pepsi, Nestle, Google, several others that he talks about. And he does list them by name in the stories in here. So he doesn't, when I ever write, I have to say, name is changed to protect or whatever, but he does tell. But one interesting thing, when he was a kid, he's an only child, and his dad wasn't happy at work, and his was just coming home miserable every day. And the dad and mom and him, the son, they had a conversation like, well, what can we do about this? And so the kid's 12, I think he was, or so at the time. And he said, well, just quit your job. Like, because what would a 12-year-old say? And so they figured out a plan, and he quit his job. And for 2 years, they traveled around on a boat. And so the deal was that Martin Lindstrom, the kid, had to figure out how to pay for the food. And so he had a job to do in this tour for 2 years on the boat. And so he had been a huge Lego fan and did special designs for Lego and more than just playing with them out of the box. So he went back to Lego and asked them, and they sponsored him for the trip. So he would take his Lego inventions and go to different ports and sell the systems, and then Lego paid. So that's pretty entrepreneurial. He's been working with them since he was 12 years old, he says. So yeah, pretty amazing. Another thing about him was I saw that he'd spoken, presented to more than 7 million people across 60 countries. And I'm at like the 100,000 number. And I thought that was a lot, like for an average business person, and he's at 7 million. So pretty amazing. Anything else to add, Brett or Dave? Anything you found interesting about him or the book yet?
I think you've got it here. I had some notes on that, but I think you've hit them all, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I thought he was just a fantastic storyteller, and that's what pulls me into a book, is how they use their stories to relate to the problem or the situation. So yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Good. Okay, so question for the audience, since this is about eliminating red tape, excuses, and BS. So for our audience, thank you for watching and for joining us. If you're here, I forgot to turn on the comments. If you are here and you can post a comment, let us know that you're watching. We'd appreciate it. Love to know who's around right now. We usually get more viewers later, so we'll welcome all of you to have comments as you view it as well. But here's a question for the audience, just to kick us off. Have you ever bought something, and have you ever bought a product and then not been able to open it? Okay, if you're over a certain age, you bought CDs. Remember buying CDs back in the day? And yeah, nobody could open it. They were so bad that another company invented the tool that you could use to open it. Remember that little scissor thing? I don't think he talked about that one in this book, but that's what came to mind when he shared a story about buying a headset to listen to his music on the plane. He bought a headset at the airport and then gets to the right up to his gate area and he can't open it. And so just how frustrating that is, and the lack of common sense in something like that. Did it bring up any examples for you, Dave and Brett?
Yeah, for me, I could go on and on about specific examples, but I tell you where this really kind of connected with me was what we've been through in the last 2+ years with COVID, where, how many times, being a tech guy, how many times did we hear a system couldn't do this, a system simply couldn't do that, or it would just simply take way too many person hours to make the system more usable or to add a feature that our users wanted. Well, suddenly we get slapped in the face with COVID, and businesses find that if we don't make this system do this thing that we wanted it to, we're going to lose customers. And, our case, in the education realm, we're going to lose students if we can't take this process that's a manual paper process and move it electronically. So that's what I was thinking about the whole time I was hearing these narratives. And I continue to try and carry that water as we come out of COVID and we're all kind of back to quote normal, say, well, remember, we said we couldn't do that. And then a pandemic hits us and we found out we could do that. So, I'm riding that pony as long as I can, and I will die on that mountain.
I love it.
If I have to.
Love it. Yeah, I can't take that as an excuse anymore. No, we can't do that. Yes, we can. Brett, how about you?
Yeah, and I had a personal experience. We've all had them, right? If we've traveled or really done anything. And mine was, my wife and I went to the Kansas City Royals game, and we just wanted to go up to the ticket window and buy a ticket. And there was literally a lady sitting behind the ticket window, and she said, "I can't sell you a ticket." And right above the window, it said "ticket window." And I said, "Okay, well, what do we do?" She said, "Do you have the app?" And it's the Major League Ball player app, which I didn't. She said, "Download the app." So I went to download the app. Well, obviously there's 20,000 people there for the game, so the Wi-Fi doesn't work.
Yeah,
so you can't download the app.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so I had to get on the network. Obviously, she had to give me a password. I had to download the app and then do this, press that, and it was about a 20-minute exchange. Now, thank goodness there wasn't anybody in line behind me because we were early. But I was more than prepared to hand her my $50 or just have her hand me back 2 paper tickets. I can't do that.
Yep.
And
again, she's right there.
Yeah, she was literally right there behind the glass window and at the ticket window, and I wanted a ticket, and she said, "I can't give you a ticket." So, and yeah, as we were trying to search for we could go on and on and on and on because there are so many of these. And as we talk about, the customer journey and being empathetic and inside out and outside in. I mean, that was just the one that kind of resonated with me.
Yeah. I felt like I started to get sort of like PTSD because all these examples kept coming up.
Oh, sure.
And I was like, okay, stop thinking of your own and focus on the stories. But
Right.
one of my favorites, like yours, Dave, before the pandemic, a client had somebody that reported up to him that didn't want to do the drive, that wanted to work from home, and at least, work from home a couple days a week. And absolutely not. There's no way. Absolutely, they have to be together. The pandemic hits, boom, everybody works from home. All of a sudden it's okay. But it wasn't okay 5 minutes ago,
Right.
but it is now. Like, you can't accommodate a person's request. And it was reasonable and all these reasons for it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, this book I looked just for fun, and it was published in 2021.
Yeah.
And many of the stories obviously have a COVID thread to them. And I thought to myself, it'll be interesting to pull this out from the archives in 20 years.
Yeah.
And COVID is, hopefully just a memory, and see, how much of the content has got a COVID theme to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then to remember all those kind of examples.
Exactly.
But there were a lot of other examples, like the examples that he used to help people relate to others. And the one with the credit card company, and the out for dinner with the CEO, I think it was, and the senior team. And he had arranged, it was his client, so he had arranged for the CEO's credit card to be rejected.
Right.
And so the credit card is rejected, and it's embarrassing. He's really annoyed. They go back to the office for the meeting, I guess, or the next day or whatever it was. And he said, how did you feel about that? I was so annoyed and really upset about it. And then, he said what happened, and, that's how your people feel when there's an error, when something happens. And he's like, okay. So that really helped. And I thought stuff like that does get to culture, even though most of his stories are about customer.
Yeah.
It does get to culture too, because, they're treating employees like that as well.
Yep.
Well, I think you brought it up in our pregame. The real question, Kelly, is how did we get here?
Yeah.
And, and is there a way out? Obviously we're talking about the world as it is, but we all have a vision of the way it should be or could be.
Mm-hmm.
And what's our role as a leader to, getting there. And as you and I talked about in the pregame, most of it comes down to cost, right? We've eliminated a person, or we've adopted an app or a technology, or, we've implemented some type of a shortcut, or maybe we're understaffed in our call center, so your hold times are longer, and they all come down to cost. And we can certainly take that approach, no question. But the other side has costs as well, right?
Right.
How many customers do you lose? What's your level of churn? Do you lose the opportunity to create a unique customer experience? Multiply the number of brand champions. We can go on and on and on. So you in particular, I think in this day and age of social media and Yelp and Google reviews, where people aren't afraid to post things negatively, and probably most of the things that gets posted are negative, and we don't post as many positives. So, and all of those things I think do have an impact. I know myself, particularly with products, not so much with services, but with products, I go look at reviews, and if people post a negative review, I probably go look for an alternative source of either the product or the service.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Glassdoor is the equivalent, and there are equivalents for the employee side.
Exactly.
And employees are looking, or candidates are looking at that and asking in interviews. And so when they ask about those reviews, and the person doing the interview says, "Oh, that was just a disgruntled person." Like, well, you had 3 of them, or you had 40 of them, like, right. And they were this year. It's probably not the greatest thing. So have you seen the impact of lack of common sense? Have you seen that in businesses where you're a customer, or in your own experiences? Or lack of common sense, or red tape, or bad excuses?
Well, my wife's an air traffic controller, so she's a government employee, and I get an earful at least once a week of something they're doing or something that's required of them. Obviously, the government's probably the worst of the worst. And, I did several years, over 20 years in the National Guard, another extension of the government. And those agencies are fraught with examples of this, where, you have redundant costs and red tape that just, obviously slow us down in every facet of the game.
Yeah. Oh man, that stings. Yeah.
Mhm.
Dave, can you relate to?
Yeah, what again, when I read these books, it always makes me think of other books, and it made me think of, and I believe it came out of the 4-Hour Work Week that I read over 20 years ago, and the author had talked about how he was seeing constant calls or complaints into the call center, where the call center operators were not able to help the people with the problems, and it would get filed into a queue, escalated up the chain. And he took a holistic look at it and said, I hired these people to Bret's point because I thought they were smart. And can I trust them to do the right thing? And even if they don't do the right thing, if they're acting on the behalf of the customer in a positive way, do I really need to be upset about that? And what's the harm of empowering these people with the power and the authority to fix the customer's problems? So it's exactly what he did. He empowered his frontline call center people with the power to go fix these problems. So of course, what happened? Job satisfaction went up, our customer satisfaction went up, productivity went up, all these various things happen. So yeah, I always kind of connect with that sort of thing. And it really made me think of that book when we were talking about what was going on in this book. So
that makes me think of Zappos was on the cutting edge of that, empowering as down in the organization as you could. And Chewy's had a lot of examples lately. And, they get way more advertising and promotion out of the cost of the flowers they send or whatever care they send to the customer whose dog passed away. They take care and they send something that costs maybe $100 max.
Yep.
And they get way more than that in the press that gets coverage of that. So,
yep.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about what he defined common sense. I thought I would just share that with everybody. There is a definition. He says it's judgment. Like, we hired all these smart people, Dave, what you kind of just said, refers to judgment and instinct that has been shaped and refined by experience, observation, intelligence, and intuition. So I could see why it's not so common, right? Because we all have all different views of all that.
True.
It's evolved from centuries of human experience. The sum total of our ability to separate right from wrong, efficient from inefficient, useful from pointless, valuable from worthless, orderly from sloppy, etc. It's dynamic, it's obvious, or rather, it's supposed to be obvious. Harriet Beecher Stowe defined common sense as seeing things as they are and doing things as they ought to be done.
Well, I think it's ironic in the title, right? Common sense is not so common, right?
Yeah,
I thought that was really ironic.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I never thought about how how big it is, though, the pressure of it. Dave, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, when thinking about that definition, I think about some of the individuals I've had the privilege of interacting with and working with over the years, and so many times the expression comes out, he's the dumbest smart guy I know. People that are highly educated, have a great deal of letters behind their name, but the common sense train just didn't stop at their station. It's kind of interesting. Bret, you were talking about emotional intelligence, and I've noticed that with sometimes it seems like the more entrenched and the more educated a person gets, sometimes they lose more and more of that emotional intelligence. And another expression we used a lot in the engineering space was, we've all heard, ask him the time, he'll tell you how to build a watch. And we took it a step further and said, ask him the time, he'll tell you how to build a watch, and also spend 45 minutes discussing the origin of time itself with you. Absolutely no awareness at all. So yeah.
Right.
Wow. Yeah. Dang, that's a good one. So thinking about all of that, and it has an impact when there's lack of common sense and more red tape and BS. What has caused it to dissipate in our companies? Why is there a little less and less of it, it seems?
Well, it's funny that that's your question, because I'm looking at my notes, and chapter 4 is what jumped out at me. And the title of that was outside in, inside out, not inside out, outside in, not inside out. And then he went on to say, focused on the role of the customer, listening and empathizing. And I wrote a note here. I said, consistency builds trust in a leader. And we, the three of us, we're nothing if not consistent. How many times have you heard us talk about listening and empathizing? Those are two core fundamental competencies of leadership. And that's really what we're talking about. So, one of the things that I always used to talk about is in the food business, Fridays were always a day when folks were in the office. And, whether they were doing paperwork, whether they were setting their calls for the next week, ordering samples. And I was just tell my team, if you don't have anything to do, go grab a dozen donuts and go to the warehouse and just, hand out donuts and talk to people. And I was never surprised that they would call me either Friday or Monday and say, you wouldn't believe that 5 or 10 leads that I got from just walking around handing out donuts. And the point that I make there is that outside in approach, right? Getting out of our comfort zone, getting out of our office, getting out of our chairs and going and putting ourselves either in the role of the customer or in front of the customer. And again, just stimulating conversation and trying to identify opportunities and pain points. And, some of what we're talking about, Lindstrom really kind of highlights that, hey, we're not doing too much of this, right?
Yeah.
Maybe we ran it through a test panel or, a consumer panel. And then after that, we turned it over to R&D operations. But no one ever really took the time to get downstream with the product and see, how is it being utilized? The vision that I had, and I don't know if I'm going to date myself, but there was a movie Tom Hanks starred in called Big, and he was an adult, but he had the mind of a child, and they hired him to basically test their products. And they sat back and observed how he interacted with their products, and whatever he liked, that's what they went to market with. And, what a novel idea, sell toys that kids want to play with. Who would have thought?
Right. And there's other toy stores that don't do that. Don't talk to them. Or I'll hear even entrepreneurs that will start a business and they'll say, I've always loved doing whatever it is. I've always loved doing this. So making candles or teaching yoga classes or doing the books. I've always loved doing that. And okay, well, is there a market for that? Is, are our customers saying they need that from you? What it's not about just what you love. It's also what does the customer want?
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, Brett, I love the point you made about, the outside in approach. As, someone that teaches tech, one thing I teach pretty much to at least one class every semester is how to design a database. And I have to take students that are majoring in business that don't really care about how a database get built and get them excited about it. And pretty much most databases in business today are, what we call the relational database. How does we look at how one data element relates to another? And when we start that design, one thing I always tell the students is, what is the one entity in your organization that you cannot live without? And of course, we use the example of a college, and they sit there for a minute and they kind of waffle back and forth. And finally, someone will say the students, and I'll say, yes, you're right. Without students, we don't have faculty, we don't have administrators, we don't have sports teams, we don't have, all these buildings, we don't have alumni, we don't have any of that. It all starts with you. And that's where we start building our database. When it comes to someone like Target, what's the center of their universe? It's the customer. And being a tech guy, when we talk about help desks and, people typically don't have a lot of positive things to say about the help desk. One thing I always remind people of, let's not forget who our customer is. And,
That's right.
It's a pain for them to call us and complain, but they're calling for a reason. And sometimes that's a problem, but when it becomes a real problem is when nobody's calling, because that means we don't have any customers. So even with our technology, we got to make those decisions of what is the center of our universe. And oftentimes that's who we should be taking care of. And, I go back to, I was telling someone just today, one thing Richard Branson said was, employees don't come first, customers don't come first, employees come first. If you take care of your employees, they will take care of the customer. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. You empower those frontline people to solve those problems, act on the best behalf of the customer. And now you got happy customers, and you also have happier employees.
Right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You go.
Well, I was going to jump ahead, so let's finish that thought, and then we'll.
In the book where he talks a lot about companies are so focused internally that they miss the external, or focused inside. Now, but on the inside, they're not focused on the right things. They're not focused on doing what you just said, Dave, of taking care of the employees. They're focused on some of the things. We don't have time to go into all that stuff with the policies and the rules and the regulations and just the compliance. I mean, all of those are important, but they can, write a 47-page policy when 2 sentences or a direct conversation with the person that wore the sandals that should be closed-toed shoes. Right. Go talk to them directly, but they, so he didn't really talk about what they're focusing on internally as much but they're not focused on the right things, focused on the people. Bret, what were you going to chime in?
Well, I wanted to jump ahead to the last 2 chapters, which were really about how difficult it is to change, and kind of a secondary theme about the book was change management and really, that inertia that companies face. And he had a 5-step.
Before we jump into that, one other, I want to touch on one other of the causes that he talks about. Was the internal politics and the silos and management being preoccupied with their own whatever needs are and all of that. And I think he goes into a lot that would be useful for people. We don't have time to go into it today, but I want to just do a shout out for it. That it's good, useful information that people could benefit from knowing about. So some of our listeners may think about the internal politics and how that is sabotaging how companies are spending their time, and the priorities get confused, and then companies value personalities over principles. That was one of his points in there too. And then he does talk about technology. Hey, quick shout out though, Rockhurst call center or a help desk. I think they're fantastic. They're really responsive, and that's been amazing. Any of the rare occasions I ever have had any issues, they reply quickly and they're on it. I think they do. I don't know if you consulted with them, but they're fantastic.
I can take 0 credit for that. But
okay.
I'm absolutely thrilled to hear it. I do know that they have put, some metrics in place to try and have a better idea of what call volume looks like and, customer satisfaction, that sort of thing. So I'm absolutely thrilled to hear that. I'm glad you've had good experience.
Yeah, I've had great experiences there for years with their help desk. Excellent. Okay, Bret, let's go into the solutions for it all.
Well, I had in my notes here, he highlights 5 different steps, and we don't need to go through all the steps, but I had 2 that kind of really jumped out at me. And one he called caged, and it was really his version of resistance to change. And he's got an illustration with chickens in a cage and corn, and you can read the book for yourself to kind of figure that part out. But what he speaks to is how difficult it is to change. And he highlights, throughout all the chapters preceding this one about, hey, this is the policy, I can't do this. And, he's basically making a statement for a lack of common sense. But, we have to understand how difficult it is to change. And we've talked about this again and again and again on these conversations, these broadcasts we've had, that, by you listening or investing in yourself or going and getting another degree, you're basically making the statement, whether subliminally or overtly, that I'm not happy with the status quo. And, if we go to Martin Goldsmith, what got you here is not going to get you there.
Oh, Marshall.
And we're recognizing that, we've got to change something. And I think that was the point he made there with this cage. So, I'll let you guys kind of chime in on that a little bit, but the note I had here is, you can't boil the ocean, and if we change 1 degree at a time, that's a very, very small change. Yeah. And he even makes the point in this section of the book about how, grab the low hanging fruit, grab the easy wins, develop some momentum before you, continually basically shatter the organization and try to rebuild it from scratch, which unfortunately I've worked with CEOs that have done that very thing, literally just took the whole org chart, threw it against the wall and started over. And, the agency and the enterprise went through a period of almost complete chaos. And I've heard of other companies doing the same thing. And you just, again, put yourself in the place of the customer. I'm not getting my product, or they tell me it shipped and nothing arrived. I mean, I've had other customers tell me, hey, we got a whole truckload of product and they don't even know that it shipped, and they just never billed us. I mean, those are some of the pain points that companies go through when they don't approach change management the correct way. But anyway, the point here was, him making the statement about how difficult it is to change.
Yeah. Dave, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I was just gonna say real quick. got to speak to a group of newly promoted managers at a company that will remain nameless. And one thing I said to all these young managers was, I said, the first thing I want you to do is break a rule and do it in front of your people. And the guy that was overseeing the session freaked out. And that was the last thing he heard me say. What I went on to say was, break that rule for a good reason, and, make an example out of it, and, prove that doing things differently or coloring outside the lines can be effective. Let your people see you do that, because that's the behavior you want out of your people as well. I was very quickly told after my presentation, I could not say that again. They were a group of rule followers, but yeah, kind of to that point of getting outside the bureaucracy. And, coming from an engineering background, the joke is always, if an engineer tells you that it's not possible, it just means they don't want to. So, kind of thinking creatively to solve these problems. And oftentimes it is that red tape, that bureaucracy that kind of holds us down.
Yeah, right on. Bret, what was your other one, your second one?
Well, I had two here. Lindstrom talks a lot about 90-day sprints, and he breaks down everything into, 90-day swim lanes, start, beginning, and end in 90 days, and you start over again. He talks in there a lot about the need for some level of leadership, whether it's CEO level or C-suite level, but, this involves change, and he talks about how it's got to start there. And I've experienced that. If I'm a mid-level manager and I think I'm going to change the culture, I may be able to change the culture within my team, but in terms of the entire enterprise, it's going to take somebody in the corner office. And, the thought I have is, Peter Drucker's quote is, what gets measured gets managed. And, we've kind of morphed that into what gets measured gets done. And I would say it's one step further. What's important to the CEO is what gets done. So, for the C-suite level people that are listening, or the senior level leaders, this has to be important to you before you can expect it to be adopted. And the way I illustrated that even further is one of the companies that I was with. I can't tell you how many speakers, how many consultants, how many software packages or HR proposals we had, and we'd go to training and spend a day or two in an offsite, and we'd get back from the offsite and you never heard of these things again. And you just said to yourself, I just spent 48 hours, and you come back kind of energized, right? That I'm going to implement this new program, this new process, this new theme, and you get back and where did it go? Why did you do that? And I guess my point is if you're going to invest the time of your stakeholders in the training, if you're going to adopt that, make sure that you've got that senior level buy-in before you put that in action.
Yep.
Yeah, right on. I hope all of my clients hear that, because that's a big thing to me as well.
If you're going to start, stay with it. And the word you're really looking for is demonstrate commitment. So the other of the five that really kind of jumped out at me, which I'm a big fan of, is celebration. And when we have these little victories, right, whether they're small, medium, or large, it's important to celebrate. And how many times do we go into the office, we go into the plant, we go into the shop, whatever the case may be, and we go, and we never really take the time to step back and reflect on what we've accomplished, nor do we celebrate our victories. And I worked with a CEO, and I love the way he used to approach it. We define the goal, right? And then we develop the plan that's going to achieve the goal, and then we execute. And along the way, we evaluate the results, and we high five for our victories, and we course correct until we've achieved our objectives. And I'm actually working with a team right now that's got a very, very big project that's going to come due about the middle of October. And I've told them, hey, when we successfully achieve our objective, based on the deadline, we're going to come together, we're going to celebrate, we're going to have some fun. I haven't defined exactly what that looks like, but I could just tell from the body language and the visual cues that I got that was something that this team hadn't heard before, and that they were probably thirsting for. And when I threw that out, all of a sudden, well, what's he going to do, or how's he going to surprise us? And, it's kind of like a Monty Hall thing here. We'll figure out what's behind door number 3 at that point. But just the fact that there's something on the horizon that's positive if we achieve this objective has energized the team, which I think is very positive, and it kind of, coincides with what Lindstrom talked about.
Yeah, nice. And he talks about not only celebrating the economic metrics.
Exactly.
So, companies will have a free pizza lunch because we hit the numbers that we anticipated. But what about all those other things that we did too? So celebrating beyond all of that. Yeah, I like that one too. That was good. Yep. Dave, any others from the list get your attention?
I really like the point that they kind of kept making about, and maybe this is our transition, but the decline of the common sense and talking about, the meetings and the PowerPoints. And that's something I've really tried to lean on, through the pandemic is, we got meeting happy, and it was, let's throw a Zoom on my calendar. And the author talks about that a lot as well of, I got to hop on a Zoom, and even got into the details of, hey, are they going to notice this is the same shirt I've had on for the last 4 meetings? I love that part. But, trying to step out of those meetings and very, respectfully respond with, I don't see myself adding value here. I'm simply not going to join this meeting. And that's ruffled some feathers for sure. But if I add value and there's something I need, then sure, I'm going to join that meeting. But the harder one is when you do join that meeting and the meeting takes the wrong direction and you're suddenly realizing you're not a valuable player in that meeting. I simply excuse myself from the meeting and kind of walk away because my time is better spent elsewhere. So I made some of those points about that in the writing as well.
I liked in the meeting part when he talked about the loop, I think he called it the conversation loop. I don't know if I wrote that down, but you talk about the topic and then you move on and then say, well, one more thing on that topic. Yeah. Like we're already done. We've covered it, but now they want to chime in on the same thing that somebody else already said. Yep. But they weren't paying attention because they're looking at their phone or just that loop of repeating the same topic. And I'm in several meetings and some groups where people will say, well, let's just cover that next month. Like, no, we're halfway through now. Can we just make a decision now and be done? And, like chop. But paying attention to all of that. And I think, didn't Lindstrom say no meeting should go longer than 30 minutes?
Yep. He did say that. Yep.
I think that's a good ambition worth attention or aspiration.
I think what I've tried to be incredibly cognizant of, especially when I call a meeting, is making my team aware. Here's things we can discuss and things we can change. If it's something we can't change, if this is coming from on high and we can't change it, I'm going to give you the summary of what the change is. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer it, but we're not going to waste time discussing how we hate this, how it is fair, it's no fun,
Yeah.
Let's find other time to do that. Let's be productive and move forward.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I like it. Yeah, he does go into some more steps, but we're at a little bit past our normal time we try to shoot for 30 minutes, but as usual, we could talk forever and ever on our books. Any last comments on this book before we wrap up?
Well, I had one point kind of related to the book, and I think it's really valuable. I was out this week and I was meeting with a local CEO of a pretty good sized company, and we got into conversation about our personal lives and what we like to do. And this guy shared that he listens to the Jocko Willnick's podcast. And Jocko Willnick was the author of Extreme Ownership, which is, up there on the shelf and one that I've read. And I thought to myself, had I not been well read, I wouldn't have been able to carry any water in that conversation. But because I've read Jocko Willnick, obviously 20 minutes of some pretty energized conversation took place. So, I looked up how many copies, Extreme Ownership has sold, and Forbes has it at 139,000 copies. So, I'm one of 139,000 people that have read the book.
That's great.
The lesson, again, for everybody that's listening, is that is one of the ancillary benefits of being well read, right? If you're not well read, you're not going to be able to carry anything in those conversations. And two, so I'm sitting there with this guy, and he basically says, hey, my company is following, kind of the book a month strategy. And he recommended another book, which I've already got, called Traction. And I haven't read it yet. So lesson number two in this little snippet here is, once you gain a reputation or a following as being an avid reader, you start to get people referring you books, suggesting you books. And, as we've all talked about, people's trepidation about reading is, hey, I don't want to invest my valuable time in a book that I'm not going to get anything out of. And typically, if the book is referred to you by somebody who enjoyed it or liked it, you're going to find the same benefit. So, two little great things, and all are a function of just being an avid reader. So, kind of cool, I thought. Yeah, it was kind of fun.
Love it.
Great book, Bret. I enjoyed it as well. So, Jocko Willnick was a great writer. He very, very disciplined individual, and I started following him on some of the social channels, and this guy posts a picture every single morning of his watch, showing that he wakes up at 4:30 every single morning to exercise, and that's how disciplined he is. So, yeah, great book.
And he posted a picture of his watch?
Yeah, every morning he'll
Funny. I like it.
And he'll prove to you he's not perfect. Every once in a while, he'll post one that says, 4:50, and he'll say, really tired, needed 20 minutes, but now I'm at it.
Lazy bum, 4:50.
That's
Come
right.
on. Wow. Okay, that's another good one. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. And we have selected the book for next month, and it is The 5 Graces of Life and Leadership. There, kind of see. And this one is by Gary Byrnes, who is the CEO of Korn Ferry, Korn Ferry. So take a look at that, and it'll be posted on the website as well. I realized that as we got started, I forgot to post the link to the handout. So I will post it in the comments, the handout in the comments. It has, I don't think it had any special charts on there, but a link to the other book on Amazon. But I'll put the link to this book on the page for, there you go. There's the, the hub for the leadership book of the month. So that's where the handouts usually are. And I'll post the link to this book for next month as well. And this one is really about, it's different than all the other ones in that it is a beautiful looking book. It actually, literally, I brought it in here into my office from my coffee table. It's out in my living room on the coffee table. It's so pretty. And so I don't want to give it away, but so take a look at that and grab that for next month. And next month's date is October 27th. So the fourth Thursday every month is when we get together to have these conversations.
Well, hey, before we go, Kelly, I wanted to put a plug out there for everybody that's listening. If you could envision yourself on this side of the microphone and would be interested in joining the panel, we're always open to that. And you say, well, what would I benefit or what do I gain? And I just jotted a few things down. Obviously, you have an opportunity to grow your personal brand. I mean, if you're on the speaking panel and you're interviewing, or, you can put this on your LinkedIn profile, what better way for a prospective employer or somebody that's looking to get to know more about you to be able to sit and watch you speak for 45 minutes. So, you have that opportunity. Obviously, you're personally accountable to study the material that we're covering. So, you're naturally invested in the book and invested in the content. And if you're looking to really grow your public speaking ability, what better way than to sit here and carry on a conversation, unscripted, extemporaneously for 45 minutes with, some peers and colleagues. So there are some, what I call ancillary benefits of, being part of the panel. So if that's something that you're considering or want to consider, would consider, I'm sure any one of the three of us will be happy to talk to you offline and kind of go through the steps and the processes, but we're always open to expanding our circle of trust and getting fresh ideas and a new insight. So certainly hope some of you will consider that.
And suggest any of your favorite leadership books as well. So if something comes out that you see that's not on our list, let us know. Share your ideas for that as well. So with that, we will end. So thank you, Dave and Bret, and thank you all for watching. We look forward to seeing you in 4 weeks. Thanks a lot, everyone.